Well, good morning. I think we have everyone, maybe a few of my folks are still planning to join, but I have 10:02. So if everybody, Mr. Woods, if we're ready to start, I think we're ready to go.
I think so. I've been asked to remind everybody about Karen Brewer that when you're finished speaking, if you would mute your mic so that we're not talking over one another. And if you have a question or something, perhaps if you would just indicate that you want to talk, raising your hand or something, we'll identify you so that we can all talk at one time. So once again, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and welcome our two most special guests this morning. Senator Edwards, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And Delegate Beitzel, to you as well. Thank you for joining us. I think Mr. Woods is going to introduce all of the board members next.
Yes, be glad to do that. First of all, I'd like to introduce our Vice President of the Board, Ms. Monica Rinker. Our retiring board member, Ms. Charlotte Seabolt, after 28 years of service. This is her final, I guess, pre-legislative meeting with the Board of Commissioners. I'd like to certainly thank Charlotte both for the 4 years that I've been fortunate to serve with her, but the other 28 total years that she's given to the Board of Education. So thank you, Charlotte, on behalf of all of us. The next member is the Reverend Dr. Matthew Paul and Mr. Rodney Glotfelty. And our newest member, taking Charlotte's place, Mr. Jason Van Sickle, who will be joining us in January and be sworn in January as a member of the elected board. Once again, thank each of you for coming, and we look forward to going through the pre-legislative initiatives as quickly as possible, as I'm sure everybody has a lot of things to do today. So thank you again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Woods. I'm going to introduce my staff. I think my screen might be split, so if I forget anybody, please chime in. But we have Karen DeVore, she's my Executive Director of Curriculum Instruction Administration. Ms. Allison Schweitzer, she's the Director of Finance. Dr. Jane Wilderson, she is the HR Director. Mr. Jeff Gank, he is our Director of IT. Mr. Rich Wazlowski, he is our Director of Maintenance, Operations, Facilities, and Transportation. And Mr. Paul Edwards, he's the Director of Secondary Education. And Dr. Nicole Miller, she's the Director of Elementary Education. And have I forgotten anyone? All right. Mr. Woods, I think we have viewers watching on YouTube.
Yes, we'd like to invite everyone who is watching on YouTube to our pre-legislative priorities breakfast, although I assume we all had breakfast at home today with our virtual meeting to try to talk to our legislative leaders and our county leaders in terms of things that we would like to see that would be advantageous to the school system. So with that said, we once again welcome to everyone. I'll ask the superintendent to lead us through those priorities.
All right, thank you so much. For those of you, this is your first time, we do usually meet with a breakfast. For the last number of years, we've been switching off between Allegheny County and Garrett County. And as Mr. Beitzel was saying a little while ago, everything has moved virtually. So we are having our breakfast meeting virtually, but really we just want to talk to Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel about how some of the proposed legislation will impact Garrett County schools, and some things that we've talked about year over year, and then to get a feel from both of you gentlemen if there are certain things that you want us to be aware of for the upcoming session. So that's our purpose for today, and you should all have the legislative priorities, this document right here. You should have it. Is there anybody that does not have it? Okay. I'm not going to read through each one. What I'll do is just hit the highlights of each one, and then since a lot of them impact us financially, Mrs. Schweitzer may chime in, and then of course anybody on my team at any point, if there's something I've forgotten to add, feel free to chime in. And we'll just go through each one, and then we'll ask for some feedback from our special guests. So of course, the first one is equity and excellence. This drives all of our other priorities. You know, since the pandemic, it has really shown us there are inequities across our school district, particularly in connectivity and ability to access the instruction as we're doing it now. And so everything that we talk about this morning is driven by equity and excellence. The first one after that, the autonomy of local boards. You know, we talk about this one every year, and this is really, there have been a number of things that have come up that in different arenas that have sought to override the local control. And we certainly understand that. And we do discuss this one at length a good bit each year. But certainly the school system and the Board of Ed would like to keep, you know, a lot of the decision-making at the local level. I don't think, Ms. Schweitzer, did I need to add anything else on that one? Okay. All right, so the next one is funding schools adequately. And the very first paragraph says there's no other investment that is more important, at least to me, and I know my team that is on the call today, of investing in public education. If you look at the first underlined thing, the fiscal year 2022 hold harmless, we understand there's probably going to be some legislation that will hold harmless any decreases that we see in enrollment. You'll see the next, on the next page, we are doing better than most districts as far as people going to homeschooling. I know that has always been a concern with our declining enrollment. We are doing better there, but our overall percentage is still declining very rapidly. And it's been exacerbated by the pandemic, of course. So anything that can help us with some sort of hold harmless so that we aren't too penalized for people that we've lost, because we do think people will be back. We do think kids will come back, probably not to the level that they were, but we are hoping that you know, a lot of the kids that we have lost will come back to Garrett County schools. Anything we can do to collaborate with various agencies or our delegate and our senator, we would be happy to entertain any collaboration for any kind of hold harmless legislation. Anything else that we need to add, Mrs. Schweitzer? On hold
Good morning.
harmless?
I think that it's just important that you both understand that we have already been collaborating with the Department of Legislative Services. Mrs. Baker has been working with her PZAM group, and we've been providing data already, leading indicator data as well as finalized data to work with the state already. So if there's anything that we can do to help the both of you during this legislative session, we're here to offer support. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one you'll see is the blueprint for Maryland's future. In that first paragraph, we have really outlined the three primary goals that we see for our next session, our next school year. And those three are pre-kindergarten funding, comprehensive supports, including wraparound services and summer services. We have led the state in pre-kindergarten collaboration and services for our youngest learners. And we want to be able to continue with those initiatives. The other one of the three is the expanding opportunities for college and career readiness. I don't know if you want to chime in, Mr. Edwards, but again, we have been recognized across the state for the way we have expanded our CTE offerings. We can't offer everything, but for a school system our size, we have done very well with our CTE programs. Anything you wanted to add, Mr. Edwards? Mr. Paul Edwards?
I think you hit that. I don't know that I have anything to add, but I do appreciate, as Kerwin was sort of matriculating through, both of your help in getting some changes to that bill in regard to CTE instruction, and particularly the piece of that said students would not be able to take CTE courses until their junior year. Having gotten in touch with the committee in that regard, we got a slight change to that. So thank you both for your assistance with that.
That is absolutely right, Paul. That would have been very detrimental to our school system if we were not able to offer those programs at 9th and 10th grade. So absolutely, thank you as well. And as I mentioned, the third is the comprehensive support. And you'll notice in the paragraph, it says wraparound services, summer academic program, increased access to physical and emotional health and social services. Again, there will be no greater time that we will need comprehensive supports for our students. We have students that have not been in school since March. We are already working on summer programs for next summer. We are already working on interventions because we are, as you read across the country, we are very concerned about the learning loss for our youngest learners, our learning loss for our primary grades, and even all the way through middle and high school. And we're also very concerned, and you'll see it a little bit later as well, about the mental health aspect of dealing with the pandemic and trying to understand everything that is happening. So this one, anything that we could support that is any kind of a stopgap measure or anything that will support additional funding or innovative ideas for reaching out to kids with social and emotional needs, we would definitely support that and absolutely advocate for that. We don't know yet the impact from the pandemic. We really don't know what it's going to be. We anticipate that it's going to be great. And frankly, I'm very worried about it. And so anything we can do to support additional grants or additional funding for those three, but particularly for the comprehensive support, that would be very beneficial to our families and to our kids. Okay, anything anybody wants to add on that one? We'll wait till the end. Okay. All right, well, the next one is local funding and maintenance of effort. You know, I feel like we have worked very well with our local government in presenting balanced budgets that work within our, I guess, our maintenance effort or within the confines of what we're given each year. I do appreciate the ability to present our budget each year to the county commissioners. We didn't get to do that last year because of what happened in March. That's usually when we do it. But we don't want to put an undue burden on our county commissioners either. So, you know, we look for any kind of innovative way that we can continue to work with our county commissioners so that they're not burdened with, if they do provide any additional funding, that they wouldn't be burdened with that whole maintenance effort for years to come. So anything innovative we can do there, I think we would absolutely support. The next one is the teacher retirement supplemental grants. Those grants that the last 2 years have been granted directly to our teachers, but it also helps us to attract new teachers. It helps us to keep our newest teachers. And so even though we give everything back to our teachers in this grant, we still would like to continue to advocate for it. Dr. Wilson, is there anything you would like to add there?
I would, especially as we're approaching very critical areas in our teacher shortage. And it's not going to be unique to Garrett County, it's going to be across Maryland. So anything we can do to attract and retain teachers would be a great service to us. So we would love your support and anything that you can do to help us with that matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, the next one is school facilities funding. We certainly, the Board of Ed certainly supports the passage of the Built to Learn Act. In particularly, we want to thank Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel for the language that allows us to leverage the 8911 that is the percentage in Allegheny County. And from what I understand, Senator Edwards, if there's changes, ours will change with it. But we really appreciate our board knows full well how difficult the 50-50 match has been for Garrett County schools and trying to get capital projects approved. So really on this part, the first thing I wanted to just say was a very heartfelt thank you, because I think that is going to be instrumental in getting some projects that are long overdue completed for Garrett County schools. So I wanted to absolutely thank you. And, you know, we know there's some legislation that and some ideas that that funding for capital projects is increased at the state level, and we would certainly support that. However, we do know that, you know, working around being in school and our limited staff, there's only so much that we can get done in one summer or one school year, but we do appreciate any additional funding and would certainly support anything that helps us improve our capital for our 12 schools and our 2 central offices, and of course Hickory. Mr. Wisłowski, did you want to add anything? Saw you shaking your head, yes, but I didn't know if you wanted
No, I just totally agree. Anything else with any more funding through the capital grants program would also be appreciative.
Yeah,
too.
we've lost we lost a couple of things. So anything, as Mr. Wisłowski said, in grants, or we can spend it, and we can certainly use the money to put it to good use. Mrs. Schweitzer, anything else you wanted to say there? And echoing Mr. Wisłowski. Okay.
Can I chip in, Barb? This is Rodney.
Absolutely.
You know, this was a real big priority for us last time we met last year. Getting this grant or the state local match to a level where we could actually afford capital projects. And certainly I really appreciate all the work Senator Edwards did with Senator Ferguson and the work Delegate Beitzel did. One thing that we mentioned back then, and it's still a concern, I think, is the fact that the state does not participate at all in engineering projects or on planning projects or architectural projects. And that can be a real problem for local governments to have to foot that entire bill. Sometimes on big projects, it can amount to millions and millions of dollars. So I don't know if they're reworking the Build to Learn Act, you know, that might be something that would be, if you could look into that and just mention that and get that included, that would be very helpful to us, I think.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Glotfeldy. That's a very good point. All of the A&E, which can be significant for a school system our size, and it has to be done. So absolutely, anything we can do there to address that would be very helpful. All right, the next one is school safety and security. And we feel like we have put a lot of the grant money to very good use that has come our way. We have built several safety vestibules in our schools to increase safety and security. I think we've done a number of things that we've addressed as far as the mental health coordinator and looking at that end of our safety for our students. We would support anything that's included in the Safe to Learn Act for addressing things like behavioral health, our systemic, any kind of bullying in our schools, in our community. We certainly would support anything you can do there. One thing that I do want to thank county government, and I know this is a public meeting, so maybe some of the other, your two other colleagues, Mr. Edwards, commissioners, are listening, but you know, there has been a lot of talk across the state about the SRO program and law enforcement programs statewide. And our sheriff's office has provided excellent SRO coverage for our schools. Each year, it seems we have been able to enhance that. I've met with Sheriff Corley on a number of occasions, and we've talked about response time. That's why we have additional SROs in the northern end, because it's a lot further to get from school to school, and they've been very supportive of that. And I do want to thank the commissioners for supporting that program. We really like that program in Garrett County. It has been a tremendous help to our principals, to us at central office, and even in the pandemic time when they have increased patrols. They have been helping their schools, even when our students have not been in buildings. They have been reaching out to families that are not engaged and students that are not engaged. So even during this time, when they're not in school every day, they have still been supporting the school system. And, I just think that it is a wonderful program, and I would hate to see anything go away as far as the SR program in Garrett County schools, no matter what happens with the rest of the state. And that funding does come through the commissioners, and they work with the sheriff's office. But as I said, we have been able to increase that coverage almost every year, and I think it's a great program. And we would be remiss if we didn't say a thank you and how much it means to us to have those SROs in our buildings. Any former principals, Paul, anything else that we want to add there?
No, I agree 100%. And as several former principals are on this call right now, including Coach Woods,
Believe me.
and you and Jane and Nicole and everyone else, it's more than just during the school day as well. They provide a lot of stuff with extracurricular activities, K through 12, and they just become part of the community, and it gives another role model and adult person that kids can go to for assistance beyond just the regular teacher. And you're right, what they're doing right now with wellness checks and so on and so forth is very noteworthy and honorable, and it's a great program.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, the next paragraph is about hiring practices. Many of you are probably aware of House Bill 486 that increased our responsibility to do background checks on all new hires. And we have expanded that not just to school placements, but anybody that is hired in Garrett County schools. We do the entire background check. That is in case somebody works at central office for 3 or 4 years and then they are reassigned to a school. We didn't want to have to try and keep track of which employees we did the full background check. We do hear that they might change this a little bit, and we would certainly support legislation that authorized a little bit more flexibility. We absolutely agree with philosophically that we do not want to put any employee in front of our children unless they are 100% safe. But it does put a large burden on us to try and make sure we have all of the background checks done within the period. So any flexibility there, I think we would be able to support. Dr. Wilderson, did you want to add anything on that particular point?
Yes, thank you. And agree, I just want to reinforce what Mrs. Baker said. We 100% support this legislation. The change that we're asking for is it does create kind of a stranglehold. We want to be able to offer a contract within the 60-day period, and we can rescind it if something comes back. Because right now, again, with this bill, every applicant that has been employed, we're looking for all their previous employers and if they've ever been investigated for child abuse. And we're very diligent of going through that. But what happens is we can't offer any type of a contract. And because of the critical shortage that we're seeing, we want to be able to offer something. And then if there's something that does come back, then we can rescind that contract. So anything you can help to just give us those provisions would really be beneficial. Thank you.
Okay. Can I make a comment, Barb?
Absolutely.
That legislation is probably going to be House Bill 1008. And I think I'm hopeful that it'll pass because the original sponsor of HB 486 in 2018 is probably on board with that as one of the co-sponsors. So you might want to look for that delegate Beitzel.
One more thing I'd like to say, and please know that I meet with my colleagues across the state every other week. And this is something that every single human resource director across the state of Maryland will support these changes. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next paragraph, the next section is on student transportation. And Senator Edwards, we've talked many times. We bring something with student transportation to you almost every single time we have this meeting. And now there has been a change at the MSDE transporting very small groups of students. We always had to ask permission to provide transportation in a type 1 or type 2 school vehicle other than in one of those. There are a number of circumstances where we have to transport very small groups of kids, whether it be JROTC or the golf team or the wrestling team that only has 5 or 6 kids qualify for something, for instance. And there are a lot of instructional field trips and things as well. And for whatever reason, we are no longer being granted that permission. So we are asking that that you support House Bill 1234. Is that correct, Mr. Wieslowski? That would permit that. We have purchased several SUV type vehicles for safe transportation of small groups of kids. And we want to be able to use those vehicles when a school bus isn't practical to drive to, and that when we do start playing again and start traveling again, when we travel downstate for small groups that aren't able to afford a school bus and a driver for 2 or 3 days for some sort of a state competition. So this one really just came up this year. We've added transportation, as I said, in the past, but Mr. Wieslowski, do you want to expand on that at all, or anything that I missed?
Yeah, a few years ago, prior to purchasing the vehicles, I worked with MSDE to write get our procedures and policies in line with what their expectations were at the time. So our policy and procedure was written based on, working with them. And then recently they changed their procedures for using these type of vehicles. So a few things that really hurt us tremendously is no out-of-state travel, nothing overnight. It has to be only driven by a full-time employee. So they added things into their procedure that just aren't conducive for the use of those things here in Garrett County. So when I asked just to get a waiver on anything individually from their procedure, they told me no, it had to be all or nothing. That's why the legislation's on the list you have there today.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, and then finally, we have 3 topics under the COVID-19 pandemic response: connectivity deficits, targeted intervention, and mental health. And anyone who's been reading any articles in the last 6 months or 8 months is aware of these 3 things, but we just wanted to talk about it for a few minutes. The first being rural connectivity. We've done it, and I'm going to defer to Mr. Gank here in just a minute, but we've done a number of things to try and enhance connectivity for our students while we're in virtual learning. It is entirely possible that even when we do go back to school, there might be a group of people that want to keep a virtual platform in next year and in coming years. But right now, the connectivity is a very big issue throughout the entire county. Also, I mentioned it earlier, the learning loss, that we're going to have to provide targeted intervention is great, particularly for special education students. That was our first group of special populations that we tried to return to in-person learning. And we are still working with some of those students, our highest needs, but they are going to need additional intervention, as will all students. And then, as I said earlier, as far as our mental health goes, any additional funding for mental health services for the stress that our students are experiencing that will support their social and emotional growth, we would absolutely support additional funding or additional programs to support any initiatives or funding that will help when our kids do come back full time. Mr. Gank, do you want to address the rural connectivity?
Sure. I mean, this is something that local government's been working on for years and years, and we see great improvement. We continue to, we have every year, we're certainly grateful for that, but we do still have some gaps, and gaps in connectivity, affordability, density of the services that are provided. And so during a pandemic like this, you kind of feel those gaps a lot more than any other time. So we still see it as a high priority. We've handed out 900 hotspots at this point, and we still have students with no real options. They're in areas where there's no connectivity options. So we've done a lot of things to try to bridge those gaps, but we just see this as something that's it's not going to go away. It's something that we'll need to focus on for years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Gank. Anyone on the instructional side, Mrs. DeVore, Dr. Miller, and Mr. Edwards, want to weigh in at all on the targeted intervention or the mental health services?
I'll let Dr. Miller talk about the intervention. I just want to follow up with the mental health services, and Mrs. Baker alluded to it in the beginning. We're seeing mental health issues with students that we hadn't seen previously. For example, gifted and talented students, and just your general good student, who was doing well, was a pleaser to teachers, liked the routine of school. Those kids without that routine we're hearing from parents and sometimes from those students really serious concerns. And when we do finally get back into the building on a full-time schedule, and even on a part-time schedule, we're going to have to build those mental health services back into our programs and make them more readily available for students and, quite frankly, for staff. One of the things that we're doing, Becky Aiken and I have been training. We went through training last spring, actually right at the beginning of the pandemic, through the Mind Body Medicine group. And Mrs. Aiken and I did an 8-course training with all of our school nurses. We also did the same training with a group of our pupil services staff, some school psychologists, school counselors, a couple of other different positions, to make sure that we have people in our buildings with these new tools in their toolboxes to deal with students, and again, also staff.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Edwards, Dr. Miller, anything you wanted to add as far as intervention?
Sure, I'll talk a little bit about intervention. I mean, we definitely are going to have a targeted strategic approach to closing gaps due to the pandemic. We are currently doing that right now as far as identifying deficits and working on interventions in the current setting. But we also know that face-to-face intensive interventions are going to be what is needed. And while we are making progress right now, we also have a completely different learning setting that we're having to navigate as well. So we do anticipate K-12 needing to have above and beyond intervention programs to close the gap. And so Mrs. Baker had talked earlier about summer programming and possibly after school programming that is beyond the school day. But we really are looking for the best bang for our buck is face-to-face, small group interventions that are really going to accelerate learning, close the gap. So we are anticipating summer programming and after-school programming that will probably have funding implications that we're going to need to be aware of as we're identifying these gaps and trying to close the gaps.
All right, thank you. Thank you to the instructional team. I'm not sure if Mrs. Brewer sent the agenda to everyone, but if she didn't, so I've gone through briefly. I know you have time to read it in advance, so I hope I hit the highlights. But at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to our two very special guests, Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel, for questions and comments, anything you would like to share with us as we move towards this next session. So you two decide who wants to go first. And
well, Senator, you lead off.
that would be easy.
Wendell, I'd suggest we go down through the list they did and do each one at a time. You agreeable?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. First of all, thanks for putting this all together and coordinating it. You could have each of you had your breakfast right in front of everybody so we could see what you kind of like for breakfast. That would have been all right. But anyway, your first topic was equity and excellence, and some of these are going to take a real quick response, at least my standpoint. I think everybody supports equity and excellence. You know, I feel good that when we talk in committee, I'm on budget and tax, we deal with a lot of educational stuff, mainly the funding aspect. We don't deal with the policy stuff. That goes to another committee. But, you know, Garrett County is usually in about the top 5 in anything in the state when they compute all this stuff, which is great. So it shows that I got to kind of watch how I say this, I guess. Poorer rural parts of the state have great educational systems, and that our students are getting a great opportunity in education to be able to move forward in their lifetime. So my short answer to that equity and excellence is I don't disagree with it. Wendell?
Same here.
Moving right along, man, autonomy of local boards of districts. I've always supported the idea, whether it's school boards, county commissioners, municipalities, or whatever, that local offices, boards, elected positions should have a lot of flexibility when we pass state legislation or if the feds do something, because you are closer to the people Every place is not the same. So the more flexibility you have, the better. Now, of course, you have to understand that with federal funding and state funding, there are some strings tied to it. But when we tie those strings, we need to allow flexibility for you to be able to reach the end zone, so to speak, what the ultimate goal is, and do it the way you think is more appropriate without going outside the boundaries of what the feds or the states might say you have to do. So I'm all for local control. Wendell?
Yeah, I would add on to that, Garrett County has traditionally had a good relationship with the county commissioners and has recognized that, the funding, not just state funding, but the local government has had to step up dramatically and increase the amount of money that they've been contributing towards the school system. And a big portion of their budget goes to the school system. So I just want to, commend the school board for working with and the relationship that they've had with the county commissioners, having been a county commissioner, working with these issues in the past. You got to understand that the school board can be autonomous, but they got to know where their money comes from, and it's best to keep a good relationship there than to burn bridges like we've witnessed down in Allegheny County on occasions. So I just would make that comment there.
Just to add to that, Wendell's absolutely correct. All of us represent the same people. The more we can work together on issues, the better it is for everybody. So we're not arguing over things. The next item is funding schools adequately, which has several things underneath of that one. The hold harmless. We're in kind of different economic times at the moment, and revenues are fluctuating and changing about every day. I know when we passed stuff last year dealing with education, we did have hold harmless clauses in them. I would assume that as much as we can keep that, we will do that. Let me just say that the revenue picture is looking a little better. When we were starting with the pandemic and we're hit very, very hard, revenues decreased considerably. We were looking at the high end of potentially a $4.2 billion structural deficit. That's now down to close to $2 billion and maybe even under that. We'll know a little better. I think the next revenue estimates come out the 11th or somewhere around that time frame. We'll have a better idea where we are monetarily, but it's looking a little better. The feds, I think, are finally coming together on another stimulus package with some of that. One of the priorities I saw there this morning are listed 5, but there's more than that, was money for education. It didn't specifically say for what purpose, but it'll probably come to the state, and the state will divvy it out to the counties based on whatever the feds hook with that. In reference to the blueprint for Maryland's future, the Senate, we'll call it the Kerwin bill, I guess is what we're really talking about here. The Senate amended the bill considerably. If you believe the numbers that were put to what the Senate did, Garrett would have gained a fair amount of money and would not have had to put any extra money in, but that's subject to debate, I guess, of how it was written. It also had clauses in there to stop funding education or increasing it based on if you had a 7% decrease in funding, you wouldn't increase any education funding. And it had a yearly look at and a 5-year big audit to look at to see if the program's doing what it was doing. Well, anyway, as you all know, that was vetoed. That bill was tied to one of your other things here, which is school facility funding. I call it the school construction bill. So when he vetoed the Kerwin bill, it automatically vetoed the school construction bill. And what I understand from my colleagues, what the leadership of the Senate, I'm assuming the House too, because or they wouldn't be talking about it so much, is what they're looking at is overriding the veto of Kerwin, which then means that the school construction bill goes into effect. And then they're going to put another bill in to change Kerwin. Have no idea what it's going to involve. I'm not sure they do, but it'll be based on, and the reason they're looking at changing it is because of the revenue flow for the state, that we just don't have the projected revenue out into the time frame that Kerwin was looking at, so that they're going to make some changes and put another bill in to replace the Kerwin bill that was vetoed, that would have been overridden. But the fact is, and the good part for Garrett is, the school construction bill that Wendell and I worked to get some change in that formula, which would help Garrett, I think, tremendously, would stay in effect, which involves about $2.2 billion for school construction over a period of time. I can't remember the time frame. Wendell might remember what that's, a couple years time frame. It's added on top of what the school construction program puts in annually anyway. So it's kind of like additional money. So this will help Garrett County considerably. It does basically ties us into Allegheny County, which I think their latest one is 8713. That's looked at every 2 years and changed. So as long as this stays into effect every 2 years, it changes. And until or unless everybody gets to 50-50, we would go with what Allegheny County percent is, which is, again, a great benefit. Commissioner Edwards talked about the CTE, I think it's called. Here again is how things can work if everybody works together. It was brought to my attention, and Senator Rosapep from Prince George's County kind of headed up. He's on B&T as I am. He's the vice chair of B&T, and he kind of put he and Senator Pinsky put a lot of this together. So I coordinated and asked Senator Rosapep if he'd talk to Commissioner Edwards in his position with the board there, supervisory board, who handles DTE, of the concerns Garrett County has, and Senator Rosapep agreed, and those changes were put in there as that were mentioned. I thought some of the A&E things were included in the school construction part of the bill, but I'm hearing maybe it wasn't, so we'll have to probably take a look and see if there's anything we can do with that. And let's see. I think the retirement thing will stay pretty close to the way it's been. And with that, Wendell, turn it over to you.
Hey, I like this format, George. You covered about all. I do have a little bit to add on the COVID. The first CARES package for COVID. Maryland actually got about $5 billion of that. 437 million went into the Education Stabilization Fund. And I don't know exactly what came to Garrett County Board of Education. I guess you all do, but Garrett County received $832 million, I guess. No, wait a minute, back up. $832,000 out of that care package that came to Garrett County. Yeah, I have maybe a couple questions in this area. Obviously, Garrett County hasn't built any new schools since Yacht Glade, and obviously you don't have any new schools that you're planning. Unfortunately, we've been shutting down schools. So I know you have Broadford that you want to rehabilitate. So this percentage change obviously makes that much more likely to occur. But I don't know, maybe you can explain a little bit, somebody, what your programs are and what your priorities are as far as needs that you have for improvements to the schools that we have. And certainly we would try to push and get funding and get those projects put in for funding. I don't know, does anyone want to explain what what you plan on doing going forward since there has been a change in the formula?
Well, I guess I'll go. So the next project that we're looking at, and Rich, you can fill in where we are with the IAC. The next project that we're looking at, big project, is the Grantsville. It was in the study that Dr. Lever did for the board, and the next big project would be to enclose the open space classrooms. Because when you go back to safety and security, since I was principal of that school and before that, it's always been an open space. And when we talk about the safest way is a closed door or a locked door, I would always say Grantsville doesn't have any doors. So that project we're looking at. Broadford absolutely has improvements, as does Southern Middle School, that are needed. So the next thing the board approved is a feasibility study to see what combining those two schools would look like. And can we afford something like that? And what would be the grade band alignments if we did so? So those are our next upcoming big projects. But anything, even if it's 8713, as Senator Edwards said, would still be tremendous compared to what 50/50 was. And that includes any of the smaller projects that we've been able to get done over, that we have, on the CIP moving forward. But those are some of the larger projects. Mr. Wazlowski or Mrs. Schweitzer, do you want to fill in anything I've missed, or Mr. Woods? I hope I answered at least part of your question.
No, I think that's fine. Yeah. So,
Okay.
The hold harmless situation, obviously, this is one we're always looking at. And I guess this really depends a lot on the number of students, perhaps, that you've lost. And I don't know where you stand as far as because of the shutdown and your virtual school, and how many parents are keeping their kids home and not even send them. So how's that impacted your funding, and how's that going to impact this particular situation if these kids don't return, or even if they didn't come back when you went virtual? How many students have you actually lost at this point, and how do you see that going forward?
Well, as I stated earlier, we have lost more students, than we anticipated losing. We knew this would be the year with the mill closing that we would likely see a loss of students there. It is going to make for a very difficult budget year, because we don't know for sure how many of those kids will come back. And if we cut staff or we make adjustments and then those students come back, then we'll have to make adjustments again. Right now, we are working on a plan to break off into fully virtual, and then we'll kind of know how many kids are planning to stay virtual for the rest of the year and how many want to do in-person learning. And that will probably give us an idea moving forward how many want to stay virtual. We have heard a lot of folks say that they will come back once we're back in a full-time, every 5 days a week regular schedule. But I don't know if we can determine that right now. Allison, did you want to add something? I wanted to add something before.
Yeah, so Delegate Beitzel, that's a very good question. We are about 3.8% down in enrollment year over year for our September 30th count. That's the count that drives all of those formula driven revenue sources, both for state and local. And so that equates to about 138 students. Right now, we are working with our principals to try to identify what could be a realistic estimate of how many of those students may come back in the 21-22 school year. But it will definitely, if we were funded just based upon our enrollment, we would be looking at anywhere around $2.2 to $2.6 million in decreased funding. That's both state and local. And so as we're building our budget and we're going through the budget process, we are looking at any types of cuts that can be scalable so that we can easily add back in whatever it is that we're cutting so that we can be very flexible, maintaining a quality education here in Garrett County, but also being very mindful of our fiscal responsibility to the citizens of Garrett County. So, you know, it's a tough act. And, you know, one thing that we've been talking about other CFOs across the state for school systems is that normally when you're building a budget, you have like a plan A, B, or C. Now we've got a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so we're really trying to keep an open mind, work with all of our partners, both state and local, to make sure that we're making wise decisions that can help us in the future. The other thing that I did want to mention is the logistics of the funding with respect to the CARES Act funding that we received. And Garrett County was fortunate. We received quite a lot of federal funding, almost $1.5 million. And it has been very helpful. But when we're asked, well, you're saving all this other money, shouldn't you why do you need more? Why do you keep needing more? And unfortunately, the money that we're saving, we're reallocating to our most critical needs currently. And so we've pledged our community that we haven't laid off any food service employees or any of our temporary contract employees. We have completely paid our bus contracts because we understand that our school system is such a huge economic driver in our region. So we've reallocated where we can, but unfortunately, some of these services that are a result of the pandemic are an add to our budget at the end of the day. So if you have any other questions about that, because I do know that a lot of people ask, well, why is public education always asking for more? And that is something that we talked to Rachel Heiss about. And I know you both are very aware of Rachel and her position at the Department of Legislative Services. And she asked us, she said, explain to me why this is costing more. So if either of you would like to have a deeper dive into that, I'd be more than happy to have that discussion at a later time.
Yeah, but Allison, thank you for that answer. And you know, as we go into session, and we haven't explained that, and but you've probably all heard that we're going to have a difficult session this year. There's been an effort, especially in the Senate side, to limit the number of bills that are put in, but there's a whole lot, and they're encouraging bills to be pre-filed, and there's a whole bunch apparently when you listen to the number that we're in the thousands something on the House side. I guess it's been already pre-filed. The thing is, keep us informed during the session, because you're not going to have access in Annapolis hardly at all. And the way we understand going into this is that they're only the legislators and their staff and legislative service people will even be allowed in, and the House is being broke down into two chambers. We're going to have the floor session, and about half of the delegates will be over in what was 180 and 170, which is former committee rooms in the House office building. And so there's not even going to be testimony allowed in person and on the bills at all. And testimony, I think, George, may on at least some of the bills, maybe all, will be limited to written testimony, and also and any testimony will have to be provided by the legislators. So it's going to be a difficult session. So when you watch, as you do, and I know you're on top of this, anything that you see bills coming in as something that's going to be detrimental. If you have any suggestions on the bills that are there that we can seek amendments to improve, let us know.
Thank you, Delegate Beitzel. We will certainly do that. Senator Edwards, was that?
Yeah, rolling right along if we,
Okay.
Wendell kind of touched on the rest. I'll just go over the rest and he can then fill in again. School safety and security. We're glad that the county's worked with school board to provide the SROs. You know, there's going to be a big push. I'm not sure what they're calling it for police changes in the policing of the state, and included in that commentary was this, you know, here again, it's a lot of this is driven by the metropolitan area. Baltimore City, and I've at least heard in the past, aren't thrilled with having SROs in their schools. So I don't know what they're planning on doing, but that shouldn't dictate that the other counties shouldn't have them if they want them, and you're funding them anyway here, or we are here, which it doesn't matter evidently what they would do there. The hiring practices, I guess I have one question. Two things with the virus and with a lot of things going on in the metropolitan area. A lot of people trying to get out of there, moving to rural parts of the state. There's people buying properties up here pretty quick. Some of them are moving here because they're able to work here, or hopefully that some of them will bring some businesses along with them, which would be helpful, and some kids that would be helpful for the education system. Do you anticipate a lot of openings in the teacher area, and do you have a lot of applications if you do? Or do you get a lot of applications?
We do, and I'm going to defer to Dr. Wilderson, except to say that we get a tremendous amount of applications. People do want to live and work and teach in Garrett County. They always have, and we hope that they always will. But the overall shortage throughout the entire state has begun to impact Garrett County as well. So I'll, as I said, I'll let Jane fill in the rest of the answer, but there is a statewide shortage that has begun to impact us.
Senator Edwards, it's a very difficult question to answer, because having a highly qualified applicant is one thing, okay? So we do have a seasoned population. We have a lot of our staff that's eligible for retirement. We are trying to help support their needs because that population has that learning curve with technology too. You know, we're in a learning environment that is virtual. It's very hard to replicate that in-person learning. So that is, I think, impacting the possibility of us having some retirements. With the applicants, yes, we are getting some good applicants, but it's really dependent on, again, the position and their qualifications, what they certify in. So, you know, we're hoping that people still want to come here and get out of the larger areas, but we'll see. I mean, I know that it's going to be very, very difficult to fill positions in special education. It's going to be very difficult to fill the early childhood positions. So unless, again, the environment changes, I mean, we'll just have to see. I mean, I'm hoping for the best. So hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. And you also mentioned flexibility in the hiring, if I heard you right, House Bill 1008. I would say, I think Wendell would agree, we would support more flexibility in allowing you to do what you think is more appropriate for hiring out here. And in the student transportation issue, I'm aware of House Bill 1234. Here again, this is driven by the metropolitan area. They don't understand or don't care or whatever the difficulties rural parts of the state have. I mean, why should we have to hire a big bus to haul 5 or 6 kids to a function down east if it's a state tournament such as wrestling or golf or whatever, when you can use one of the vans you were talking about. Community colleges have vans. So I don't know why K through 12 couldn't do that. So we'll do what we can. We did get a change a couple years ago with community action and Head Start programs. They had to use the same kind of bus that did through K through 12, but there was another kind of bus. We did get approval for them to do that. So hopefully we can get the changes that are needed to allow you the flexibility to use whatever size vehicle, for a better way to say it, is appropriate for whatever function you're looking at doing. And as far as the COVID-19 pandemic response, we do have the rural broadband program that is in effect. I happen to be on that task force. What's been approved at this point is a $100 million program, 50 million from the state, 50 million from the feds, at 10 million a year for 5 years. We're in the second year, I believe, of that. Hopefully we can keep going. Plus the governor, I think, did put some extra money in recently for that program, which will be very helpful for what you're all doing. If you in the future need to do more virtual, hopefully allows the public more opportunity to get on broadband, which helps the kids and the families. And as far as the mental health thing, under that, if you look at the numbers, the drug usage is going up considerably. So is suicide and so is abuse. Just three of the main ones. There's probably other things connected there that are impacting families considerably, and particularly young people. So the sooner we can get back to being in the classroom, I think the better it is the whole way around for everybody involved. And just briefly, Wendell touched on the house. Each house has different rules. My understanding, of course, this changes about every other day. The first 3 weeks in the Senate anyway, I think we're to be in Annapolis like on Wednesdays. Everything's going to be virtual, even when we're there. You will not, as Wendell said, the same thing in the Senate, be able to come to committees to testify. I asked the president the other day how they're going to coordinate the committee hearings. If you have people, I said, you could get thousands of people sign up to testify because they don't have to travel to Annapolis. But it's going to be some way in the Senate that the sponsor of the bill gets to have 4 people. The opposition to the bill gets 4 people, and then it goes 2 for whatever I guess the chair wants to do. It's going to be really interesting how this pans out. If you want to come and visit, we can only have 2 people in the office at a time. You have to check in at the main desk. We have to come and get you. And when you're done, we have to escort you down to the main desk so you can get out of the facility. On the Senate, they built, if you can pull it up on a computer, you can probably see it. They built cages, as I call them, around each desk, plexiglass stages. We have to be in committee to vote. And they're doing some things there too with the desk, moving them further apart, and I think putting up some plexiglass. But most of the hearing kind of material will be on computer, virtual, and I can be sitting in my office and the committee's right down the hall, but I'll be sitting in the office looking at the computer instead of going to committee, except when we vote. We'll be on the floor. We have to be on the Senate floor to vote. They did talk about and discuss bills on the floor of only allowing 2 hours at a time. And if we go past that, we have to go out for a little bit. They dust things up a little and then we go back in. So it's going to be stressing. And also the Senate, we passed a rule of limiting the number of bills people can put in. We were going to do this. We even talked about this before the virus hit, because we have people putting in 50, 60, 70 bills, most of which whoever puts them in knows they aren't going anywhere. This costs the state money and time of staff. So what you're going to see under the circumstances that we have now, prioritizing bills. And the main ones that leadership wants, they're going to be the first ones on the agenda. But you still can participate, and Wendell mentioned that we ask you to participate. Keep us informed. You can do emails, phone calls, text to our offices down there. We will have staff in the offices. Things come up that you have an interest in one way or the other, please let us know. And we'll get you and keep you as informed as we can on whatever they are. So, Wendell, you want to fill anything else in there?
Yeah, let me jump in a little bit here on the rural connectivity deficits here in Garrett County, and then maybe I have more questions than answers. But currently, looking at the total student population, what is the number of students in percentage approximately that doesn't have access to the internet since everything's virtual? And what, just briefly, have you been doing in order to reach those kids?
Well, I'm going to let Mr. Gank, because he's been instrumental in a lot of the mitigation strategies that we've tried to connect folks. And then we'll talk about any other instructional things that we've done. But I'll go ahead, Mr. Gank, and answer Mr. Beitzel's question.
So we've handed out around 900 hotspots, and those are per household. So that would indicate that those households either don't have connectivity, or the connectivity that they have is not sufficient to support the kids, the number of kids schooling from home. Maybe mom or dad or both are also working from home. So in terms of percentages, you're probably looking at something like a third or more. Maybe up to 40% needs something. And that doesn't mean they have nothing at all, but they may be relying on a hotspot of their own, and it's just not sufficient for online schooling. And then after handing those out, which those were provided courtesy of the Office of Rural Broadband through for their grant. But outside of that, even after handing those out, we still have over 200 students where a hotspot is not helping them. They're just in a very remote portion of the county where there's no internet connectivity and there's not sufficient cell phone service there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, that's a staggering number. Those kids are at such a huge disadvantage as opposed to ones that do have adequate service. I know there's, as you indicated, there's a lot of extra money coming in, and there's been, you know, before this COVID came along, a big effort to get high-speed internet service to rural areas, and that's continuing. And I know Mr. Edwards, in this case, Commissioner Edwards in the county side knows that the effort the county's putting in order to expand access, you know, and I have just family members and stuff that are dealing with this issue, don't have access, trying to get connected in order to even receive the instruction that you've been providing. So it is a big problem, and it's not going to be solved, I don't think, before this hopefully virus is solved. But it is something that we have to deal with in rural areas, and we will continue to do what we can do in Annapolis to support additional funding and stuff to get this issue resolved.
You know, another thing, we did set up a help desk that would help with technology issues. It doesn't address the connectivity issue. And then we also used a lot of funding to purchase devices, and, you know, everybody else was purchasing devices as well. But, you know, I think we're good there as far as actual, they're not all in yet, but they're scheduled to come in. It really is the connectivity. And it is a huge number. You're absolutely right, Mr. Beitzel. It is a very large number.
If I can I just follow up on the other question there. You know, maybe there is a positive note in this all. You know, Garrett County traditionally, not traditionally, with that question, has always experienced the most number of snow days and have to shut down during snowstorms and everything. With everything you're doing and everything you're putting in place, maybe in the future, you won't have to have snow days. You can just go virtually during those days and help solve that problem of having to extend school and that sort of thing. I don't know whether you've considered that.
Oh yeah, we are definitely working on that. We are working on that for sure.
Yeah.
We're getting different
Thank you.
guidance from several different areas, but we are absolutely considering it if it's allowed.
So maybe we could not open school after Labor Day then.
All right.
Just comments. Sorry, you don't have to comment.
Paul.
I want to piggyback on Delegate Beitzel's comment, and he's absolutely right. And I know in our internal conversations, and Superintendent Baker, you can, you know more about this than anybody, but the infrastructure we've put in place and the format we now have with virtual learning, and the idea that everyone I know on this call and everyone in our county thinks is a good idea to have the opportunity to not have snow days, but to have these virtual days count. From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least MSDE has been reluctant to just make a statement to say that they're going to allow that either now or into the future. And this would be the opportunity, I think, to convey to our delegation that any help, support, pressure, if you will, that they could put on MSDE or any of the decision-making body that would make that determination to push those people, in our case in particular, in Allegheny County as well, to be able to use this technology to, instead of having a snow day, to count the days. If we need that state assistance, now's the time to ask for it, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Paul. You're absolutely right. And when I said that we're getting different, we are working with MSDE, but they have not been in favor of allowing the school system to just go to red for a delay or for a closure. I see it as if you're going to red or a fully virtual for safety reasons for COVID, we're also would be doing it for a snow day for safety reasons. So I'm very hopeful that at some point that will be authorized, and we're willing to jump through whatever hoops are necessary because we do have so many snow days and it is a disruption to instruction. And it also is difficult at the last minute with a 2-hour delay or an early dismissal for parents. So, you know, we would be willing to adopt any rules people would set for it. But if we could, once we have virtual, you know, we're sure how we can do it for snow days, it would be very beneficial to Garrett County to be able to do that.
George, you can move
Let
on.
me ask,
Just excuse, I have somebody at the door. I have to just step aside here for a minute.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, George.
just to, on that issue, how about sending Delegate Beitzel and myself a letter? What you're talking about, you know, going virtual on snow days, et cetera, who you've been talking to.
Done. I will send you a letter, no
And
problem.
we can start beating on it right now as far as that goes. And just follow up, again, a little bit on what Delegate Beitzel brought up. We do have a great working relationship with the county commissioners. They are willing to put in when we can't get total funding for something, they're willing to fill in the hole, which is good. We made a lot of progress. They've done that with the broadband issue. They've done that with school construction. Hopefully, and we get back up to that everything goes through appropriately there, and we get the new funding formula that you can do some of these projects you've had to put on hold for a while. And you're going to have to restructure some of them because the original one with Southern Middle had some stuff in there that you don't need in there now. So you're going to have to redo what you're really looking at in some of these projects. And
Okay, I'm back.
Jump on it rather quickly, but you may have to do it rather quickly so you can get your requests in once this comes into effect. Because if you get it approved, once you get it approved as it is under the existing scenario, that's the formula that stays in effect to complete the project. So, you know, if it changes in 2 years, if you got it approved now, you get it under that particular percentage point. So, Wendell, you were out there. I just asked them to send us a letter and what they're talking about, who they're talking to down east on the using this for snow day purposes, et
Right.
cetera. We can follow up, put a letter together and send it to whomever.
Right.
But again, that comes back to all of us working together on these kind of things. So we can give it a push from the state level, but we need to know the specifics from you all on what you're trying to do or wanting to do.
No problem. And, I think we do work very well together. I appreciate your willingness to always hear from the school system. I also appreciate knowing about the access to your office, because last year when I came down to visit and we talked about the CTE in your office, it was 8 hours, I think, trying to find a parking place, and I was there about 20 minutes talking with you. So maybe parking will be a little easier if nobody's in Annapolis this year. But anytime that you need us to write a letter or need our support for something, please don't hesitate, because we are happy to work with you and in any of these areas that we both agree are important.
I'll just say one more thing. I'm talking a little bit much here, but Wendell and I are both in pretty good positions. I think both pretty well respected by the other side of the aisle. Wendell's on appropriations. He's the ranking Republican on appropriations. He's on the capital budget. I'm on B&T, and on similar, I'm the ranking Republican, and on the subcommittee that deals a lot with what we do out here. So we can sometimes get some things done that maybe otherwise we would not be able to do because of that. And I'm not patting ourselves on the back, but I guess maybe I am. Wendell and I work very well together and try to coordinate across the hall with each house and trying to get things, and where we can amend to help the county out, we try to do that.
And much appreciated.
Well, I will pat you on the back as board president, both of you. I don't know what we would do without the two of you, quite frankly. And I mean, in all sincerity, you are both willing to listen to the needs of not only everybody in our county, but particularly Garrett County. As a guy now that's been involved in Garrett County's educational system, this will be my 40th year of some type of involvement. The things that we have been able to do in this county and be one of those top 5 county school systems, which, to me is very important, because as a teacher for all those years, it was important to be known in that capacity. But the things that both of you have done to work with commissioners, we have a great working relationship, I think, with the commissioner's office. We don't always agree on everything, but that's just part of it. We're going to have to give and take, especially during the pandemic. But to know that we can meet with our senator and our delegate and know that they listen and understand the needs we have is, I'm sure in this day and age, very difficult to find, especially when you go further east. It's impossible to find, I'm sure. So thank you from all of us. Seriously, as a 40-year educator, I couldn't ask for 2 better representatives.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, actually, Tom, that goes right into if Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel, if you didn't have any further questions or comments, the next thing on the agenda was to see if there were comments or questions from the board members. Are you both okay? We'll move on to the board members, or anything else you want to say? Okay.
Okay, at this time, I would like to encourage any of the elected board members, and certainly Jason, you're welcome to ask any questions you may have as well. To our legislators, anything that we've not covered or anything you'd like clarification on. So the floor is open for any of those questions or comments.
I would just jump in here for a minute, if I may, to congratulate Jason on his election and welcome him to the school board. And I'm sure he'll do a great job and work with the rest of the members there. So Jason, welcome to the Garrett County Board of Education. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ditto to that, and thank you, Charlotte, for all your effort over, I think Tom said 28 years, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Right. And I did that also. Thanks, Charlotte.
Well, what people don't realize is Charlotte was first elected when she was 18 years of age. So yes, not been that long ago.
I think I was 18 when she was.
Thanks, Tom.
Matt, maybe Matt was 18, but I don't think I was. Could I have one now? Can I have a
Yep.
comment?
You may.
Hello? Oh, thank
go
you.
ahead, Charlotte.
Thank you. I have a delay here, so. Okay, I would, on the question about using the virtual for snow days, I was reading an article this morning and it said that Howard County had been okayed to do that. It seemed like it was talking about in the past. So that might be one of, and they actually have a policy, which I'll try to get to you today, Barb, that they've written up about how to use virtual for snow days.
Yes,
So
actually,
there is a move for that in the county.
Actually, I actually spoke with Mike Monterano, who's the superintendent in Howard. I met with him on Friday, and it's a little misleading. I have all of the information. His is only what they're doing while in fully virtual. They voted until April to go fully virtual. So when he's talking about closing buildings, that doesn't mean they're going to go to virtual that day. That just means all of the schools will be closed. Otherwise, if he doesn't make any announcement, all of the schools will just continue on with virtual learning. It's a little misleading because that's what I thought when I saw Howard County. That's why I asked to speak with Dr. Monterano. And he said it's only while they are in virtual. It doesn't affect any district that is part in person that, when we do get back to in person. So I wanted to make sure that the other board members understood.
Okay.
Not as good as it sounds necessarily, so.
Right.
That would apply to us now, right?
Right.
Right now.
But I think it is a good opening, as far as if you can do that during the pandemic and, that can work, then that could be something you could use at the state level. And I was just, wanting them to be aware that some counties are working on, toward that now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from board members?
I just want to echo what everybody else has said. It's wonderful to have a delegation down in Annapolis. It's so receptive to working with us, and that goes with the county commissioners too. And I know you two are both well respected. I sit on the MABE Legislative Committee and now on the MABE Board of Directors, and both of you are very respected by that group as being open to conversations and discussions, and they recognize, the importance of your positions in both the House and the Senate. And I think we do too.
Thank you.
Karen?
I just wanted to say I have to hop off for another meeting with principals, but I wanted to say it was nice to see everybody this morning and thank you for all that you do.
And tell them we'll be right there.
Anything else, anyone? Okay, hearing nothing.
Monica has her hand up.
Brinker's raising her hand, Mr. Woods.
Monica.
Yes, I guess it's time for me to talk. I want to thank Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel for everything that we've heard today from them. But I do have a question for Delegate Beitzel. During one of his comments, he comment about shutting down schools. I'm not sure what he meant. And then he said he questioned about like Broadford. It was talking about our school construction a little bit. Currently, to my knowledge, we haven't voted or had discussion about shutting down schools. I'm not sure what you meant or what you've heard. Can you explain that better, please?
What I meant was shutting down the schools where you went virtual. In other words, you're not having in-classroom instruction. That's what I meant. And, personally, I think we need to get those kids back in the classroom as soon as possible. And I'm sure you all understand that and are doing everything you can. And I would encourage you to move forward as quick as you can as conditions allow to get kids back in the classroom.
Thank you for your clarification, because I know there's people watching on YouTube and I wasn't sure what you meant. So thank you for explaining that. And I do agree with what you just said. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right, well, on behalf of the Board of Education and those that work in the central office and the superintendent, I'd like to thank both of you for sharing your time with us today. And we look forward to communicating over the next few months. Hopefully, we get through all this together. And obviously, for those watching, all of us would like to see all of our kids back in school tomorrow if it were possible. But I think every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when you see the health department, Garrett County Health Department reports that we get, you understand the very difficult position that all of us are in trying to do in-school learning among our students. I mean, those are devastating numbers at the moment, and hopefully they'll get better. And I certainly encourage everyone to wear a mask and wash your hands and socially distance and do all the things to help. But right now we're experiencing the most difficult time, I hope, that we ever see in Garrett County, because I can't imagine it getting a whole lot worse. But it is very difficult, and we're working very hard to try to ensure the safety of our students and our staff, get them back in the buildings as quickly as we're able to, with consultation with Bob Stevens and others throughout the state and the county to make that a reality. So once again, thank each of you for coming. I'll see the other 4 board members at 1 o'clock as we finish some of our business at an executive session that we have set for 1 o'clock. So once again, thank you for your participation.
All right. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Merry
Thanks,
Christmas.
everyone. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Have a
Bye-bye.
very Merry Christmas.